back, my friends, to the Derate The Hate podcast. I'm your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. The Derate The Hate podcast is proudly produced in collaboration with Braver Angels, America's largest grassroots, cross-partisan organization working towards civic renewal. This podcast amplifies the mission that we share to foster a more respectful and united America where civic friendship thrives even when we disagree. Each week, through the power of story, conversation, and connection with incredible guests, we work to build bridges instead of barriers. Not to change minds on the issues, but to change how we see one another when we differ. Because, friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, share it with a friend, and visit braverangels.org to learn how you can get involved in the movement to bridge the partisan divide. Friends, I am so incredibly grateful that you have joined me for another powerful Derate the Hate episode. So let's get to it. This week's guest is Stewart Fletcher, Director of Communications for Living Room Conversations, another organization that is doing wonderful work in the bridging and depolarization space. Stewart's journey into this work began around the time of the 2016 election and pivotal moments like Charlottesville. Events that highlighted just how fractured our country had become. Since then, he's dedicated himself to helping people rediscover the transformative power of respectful, empathetic dialogue. In this conversation, Stewart and I dig deep into why conversation, real, vulnerable, face-to-face conversation is not just valuable, but vital. We talk about how Living Room Conversations provides a simple yet powerful structure to bring people with differing viewpoints together, not to debate, but to understand each other. We're diving into what it really means to truly listen, how shared experiences bridge divides, and why curiosity and respect are the secret ingredients that can turn polarization into connection. If you care about healing divides and building stronger communities, it's another Derate the Hate conversation that you do not want to miss. Let's get into it with my friend from Living Room Conversations, Stewart Fletcher. Here we go. Stewart Fletcher, thank you so much for joining me here on the Derate the Hate podcast. Good to see you today, man. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
I was bouncing around LinkedIn one day, and I see this organization called Living Room Conversations. I'm like, wow, I got to figure that out because I love the whole thing about conversations. I have a lot of conversations, and I think one of the best ways to navigate a lot of our problems in society, in our personal lives, in our politics, is through conversation. And I talk a lot about kitchen table conversations, but naturally I saw living room conversations, and I'm like, got to check that out. The more I dug in, the more I liked. And like I said, just grateful to have you here today to learn more about Living Room Conversations. Now, you're the communications director at Living Room Conversations, right, Stewart?
Yes, I am their director of communications. I am in charge of all of their outward-facing marketing and their social media presence and their newsletter.
Very good. And what brought you or what got you interested in the, let's say, bridge building, depolarization space? How long have you been with the organization Living Room Conversations?
So I've been with, we can call it LRC if Living Room Conversations is too much of a mouthful. Okay. I know I end up typing conversations, that word, maybe 100 times a day. But yeah, so LRC, I joined in the very beginning of 2022. So I've been with them for about 3 years, not in this current capacity. I've only been director of communications for the last 6 or so months, just about.
Okay.
And I guess really what drew me to the bridge building space in general was, and I think this is the same with a lot of people, was kind of the 2016 election. It was so contentious and so polarizing, and it seemed like every day, every soundbite, every news article was about how evil the other side was. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, the other side was like the personification of evil. And that just didn't sit right with me. That didn't seem honest. It didn't reflect how my relationships with people on either side of the political spectrum have been. And so I've just wanted to kind of, I guess, fight against that narrative ever since then.
I think that's why a lot of people find themselves, kind of dipping their toe into that depolarization pool, right? Because they see a lot of the ugliness that we see online. They see how polarized things are online, all the ugliness in our politics, in our media. They're like, this doesn't really completely and totally reflect what I'm seeing in real life, in my circles. So maybe I can only speak for myself, Stewart, but that's really one of the things with me is when I started to see not only what was going on online in the media, especially in our politics, I'm like, this does not reflect what I'm seeing in real life. But then what I started to see more and more often was people gravitating to that ugliness online, in the media, in our politics, and then it did start to affect their life and did start to affect things in real time in their circles of influence, in their communities. And I'm like, something's got to be done about this. And so I love having conversations with people in this space, Stuart, especially people who have made this, whether they make it an actual profession or it's just a passion project, a mission, something they do on a volunteer basis. Now, let me ask you this, Stuart. As the director of communications at LRC, is this your job? What were you doing before this? Is this a side gig, or is this your full-time deal now?
I would love for it to become my full-time deal. Right now, I work part-time for LRC, and I go to school. I'm at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. Okay. And so I'm a political science student, so my work and my school kind of weave in and out of each other. It's kind of fun. You hear stories brought up in class about things like Braver Angels, or you hear about the Listen First Coalition, and you're like, oh, like my schooling and my work get to complement each other so well that it kind of feels like I'm doing it full time.
Yeah, no, I get that. I incorporate all the things that I do, my depolarization work, my work with Braver Angels, my work with the Pro Human Foundation. I incorporate all these different things into my everyday life. So as we weave these things together, it's often hard to see where one ends and one begins, or vice versa, right? Because I think when you get into this work, and this is what I want to dive in with you a little bit more, is as we get into this space, as we start doing this thing, it becomes infectious. It becomes one of these things where we're like, or at least it is for me, and I'd like to get your viewpoint on this. I start to see ways that I can incorporate the lessons that I learn in the depolarization work, in the depolarization space, into everything else that I do, and trying to influence people to see things. Not necessarily I'm not here to change minds. I'm here to open minds. And I think that's a lot of what this is, these conversations that we have in the bridge building space. It's about opening minds and showing people that there is a better way. There's a better way to have non-contentious conversations about contentious issues. Is that the same thing that you're seeing, Stuart? I mean, whether it be at school or in your work with LRC, when you weave these things together, has that been your experience?
One of the fundamental values of the bridge building space is just like open and honest communication. It's listening skills, it's respect, it's all these kinds of things that apply very deeply to politics and to polarization, but like you're saying, they're universally applicable. It would be like impossible for me to go from having a living room conversation where we agree to listen and suspend judgment and let other people talk to then like go out and like start spreading vitriol and hate. Like I'd be it just wouldn't work. I'd be living in this weird like dissonance with myself. And so yeah, I would say it's definitely changed the way that I communicate almost in general, but especially around politics. In my day-to-day relationships, even online, like in comment sections, when I'm just representing myself, I can say whatever I want. That's kind of the weird beauty and also the horror of the internet is it's like no accountability for what you say. But I'm still motivated in those moments to say kind things and to kind of bridge gaps and to find common ground. Because otherwise I'd just adding to the division that I'm trying to fight. It wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, and it's wild for me, Stuart, to think back to some of the online toxicity that I used to engage in back in the day, and then to see how far I've come as a part of this work, as whether it be the work that I do with the podcast Derate The Hate, or now as one of the leaders within the Braver Angels organization. Again, those things now, for me, I just don't see where one ends and the other begins. They've kind of blended. Now, for my personal story, many people on the DTH podcast or listening to the DTH podcast know, because I've been very upfront about it, I was very toxic before. A lot of the people that I encounter in the depolarization space had some kind of a moment. They had something where their story started as, something happened, and then they found their way into this space. Was that your experience, Stuart, or how did you find yourself getting into this type of work?
To me, it wasn't necessarily something that happened personally. It was I have a very vivid memory of, I think it was 2017. Now I'm saying my memory is so vivid, but I can't remember the year. But I remember all of the crazy violence and chaos around Charlottesville, and people were coming out, and there was this video of students with tiki torches, chanting all sorts of hateful messages, and then there were people coming out there like, we're gonna fight these evil fascists and we're going to become Antifa. And I remember watching this footage thinking, this is not the way to solve these kinds of problems. I don't remember when it was, but it might have been Charlottesville where there was a crowd of people and somebody drove a sports car into the crowd of people and then backed up and ended up killing like 2 or 3 people in the process and injuring who knows how many. And I just remember sitting back thinking, I was raised to believe that we were the most advanced, the richest, safest, most powerful country in the world. You hear all this rhetoric about how great the United States is, and then you see that we're incapable of even having conversations. And then you start to go, well, maybe we're not great at all. You start tearing down any institutions. I think that's why like institutional distrust is on the rise, is because people go, well, I thought we were this great country. Now there's all these problems. We can't even seem to talk. So maybe none of it was worth it. Maybe we shouldn't believe in anything. And of course, I think that's an overcorrection. I think there's a happy medium. But I that kind of the rhetoric and the videos and the news that I was watching at that time were just all so hateful that I just had to tell myself, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, there's definitely got to be a better way, and I'm right there with you. One of the reasons I came up with the name Derate The Hate is because at some point you either have to turn down whatever it is that's driving this thing, or it's going to implode. It's going to tear itself apart. I think the Charlottesville example is fantastic, Stuart, because seeing the ugliness that came along with that, and that's not just one of them. Or that's just one of many. But the whole thing that bothers me, and kind of to your point, is there are so many people out there that have learned that they can capitalize on this fear, outrage, and grievance. So they drive that model, and I call them outrage entrepreneurs and grievance grifters. They push forth this narrative or these fake videos, these deep fakes that they know are going to drive a wedge between otherwise reasonably minded people. And that's why I think it's so important the work that we are doing in this space, because if we just continue to allow those forces online, whether it be just the outrage entrepreneurs and grievance grifters that have made a name for themselves in social media, or the standard cable news media stations that tend to push a narrative that gravitates towards one side of the spectrum or the other, or the loudest voices within our politics. If we just continue to allow them to go and spew this unfettered nonsense that they know is creating division, then where do we end up? Where do we end up? Because, I used to believe myself to be a reasonably minded person back in the day. But I would watch all that stuff. I would feel my blood pressure going up. I would feel my emotions taking control. I would feel myself losing the ability for rational thought when it came to certain things. Mm. And I look around, and that's what I see. I see a lot of that. So talk to me about how LRC has... well, first, let's go back. I guess let's go back to the beginning. I know you haven't been there as the director of communications for a super long time, but you've been with the organization quite some time. And then obviously, as the director, now you know how they got started. Talk to me about how LRC got started back in, say, 2010 when they got started.
Yeah, so this year is our 15th anniversary. We're kind of celebrating that in a happy, sad way, where it's like, we've been doing this work for so long, it's great, but also maybe things are getting worse. And so we're happy to be in the fray. We were started by two women who, predominantly one of them, Joan Blades, who's still with Living Room Conversations, she was most worried about climate change. She felt in 2000, in the early 2000s, that climate change was such an imposing incoming issue that we were unable to even talk about, because if a liberal person brought it up, well, then it's like fear-mongering propaganda. And if a conservative person brought it up, well, then it's, fear-mongering propaganda. Like, no matter which way, people felt like it was this untouchable, unfathomable issue to even discuss. So she wanted to discuss it. And she knew that the only way to solve major problems, like global problems like that, would be if both parties worked together. So initially she brought together a bunch of her friends. Well, it started with her and one other guy who was conservative, and both of them brought their own friends. So it's kind of people that had never met came together in this group. And she loved that model so much that it kind of birthed Living Room Conversations from that, from this idea that you can bring, 4 to 6 people together, and it doesn't matter how different they are. If they all agree to what we call the conversation agreements, just like 6 guidelines about respect and listening, then you can really talk about anything. And once you can talk about anything, now you can solve problems. Now we can move forward. Now we can answer these kinds of questions about climate change, about immigration, about gun control, about abortion, like these big hot button issues that have been hot button issues my entire life, for decades, because we can't seem to solve them. The impetus is we can't solve them because we can't talk about them.
Right.
But once we can talk about them, now we can actually move forward. So that's kind of where Living Room Conversation comes in, to give people the platform and the structure to talk about these really heavy, often very personal issues, but in a way where they can feel comfortable and safe and listened to.
Well, that's right. I mean, it takes me in my mind right to the work that I do with Braver Angels, right? I mean, structure is a big part of that success model, because when people well, let's just break it down to the basics, and then I want to hear more about LRC's kind of structure, so people understand it a little bit more. But one of the greatest things about that structure is providing people with the knowledge or the confirmation that they're going to come into a structured environment where it's, for all intents and purposes, it's going to be a safe space, in the sense that they know that they are going to be able to speak. And we talk at Braver Angels about being able to speak freely, fully, without fear. But not only are they going to be able to speak and not be spoken over, but they are going to be speaking to somebody who's coming with the intent to listen, with the intent to hear what they have to say. I think that is a huge part of that model. It's a huge part of that structure. It allows people to open up when they might not otherwise open up. And then it allows them to be comfortable enough to actually listen too, because it's a two-way street, right? Yep. So talk to me about LRC's model, about their structure, because I mean, again, hugely important. And I love that small, intimate model, 4 to 6 people. It's beautiful. Talk to me about that structure. What are some of these ground rules that LRC uses, Stewart, to kind of ensure that safe? I don't like necessarily using the phrase safe space, but I mean, it really kind of is what it is.
So our main structure of living room conversations is based on the idea that if you can see someone as a person, you can talk about anything second. So we have 3 rounds. The first round is an introductory round, which is all about getting to know each other, not in like, where are you from? What do you do for a living? Where are you? Do you like it? Like, not in a small talk way, but in a very more intimate way, where we have conversations that build on questions of, what are your hopes and concerns for your family or your country? How would your best friend describe who you are? What kind of purpose or mission drives you in your life? These are the kinds of questions we start with in round 1, so that people can see how much we all tend to have in common. I've had conversations with people very far right, very far left, and everywhere in between, and almost always do I hear the same kind of sentiments around their purpose, around their hopes. Everybody wants freedom. Everybody wants safety. Everybody tends to want their family to be doing well or their country to be protected. Like, there are these kinds of recurring themes. So in round 1, if we can establish that bedrock of understanding, then we go to round 2, which is kind of the topic round. That's when whatever the conversation topic is, one of our most trending ones right now is immigration. And so you'll go through questions related to immigration, but instead of being this kind of fact-based debate-like questions of like, what percentage of our population is immigrants? Do immigrants really take jobs? Do immigrants really do, like, what are the crime rates? Those kinds of things are helpful, but they're not really useful in living room conversations, in building that kind of trust. So instead, we focus on experience-based questions. Questions that make you answer with a story, with something, like, in your life, what has been your relationship with immigration? That kind of question opens up a whole different can of worms. Now, instead of me saying, oh, I fall on this side of the line or that side of the line, now I'm talking about my childhood. Now I'm talking about my parents or my neighbors or people who I know who've immigrated to this country. And that allows us to connect as people.
Absolutely. Yep.
And all of this is kind of wrapped in, like I mentioned before, the conversation agreements. We have 6 of them. The first 3 are most fundamental. The first one is be curious and listen to understand. Like you were saying with Braver Angels, like the promise that somebody else is going to be listening to you comes with the promise that you are going to be listening to them. Yeah, this mutual respect, which goes into our second one, which is show respect and suspend judgment.
Yep.
One of the things I love about that is it doesn't say get rid of judgment. Like you were saying at the beginning, it's like we're not trying to get everyone to agree. That's not our goal. Our goal is, hey, let's give judgment, a timer. let's give it a bit of a fuse.
Sure.
And if I said something, today, because words are such a hotly debated political thing, if someone used the wrong term, if I said illegal aliens versus, unhoused people, like these kinds of phrases that we always have that are slightly different depending on your political agenda, you can suspend judgment for a second. Instead of going, he used the wrong term, now I'm going to discount everything he says. Wait a minute, see what they have to say. Listen with that curiosity, because maybe they're going to say the same thing you believe in.
Yeah, hugely important.
Just barely, I had a funny conversation. It was an online conversation, so it was a whole bunch of strangers. It was like 10 different strangers. And a guy jumped on the call who was an elderly gentleman with a big white beard, glasses, with a thick Southern accent. He was from South Carolina.
Okay.
And throughout the course of the call, one of the women on the call called herself out, which I thought was very funny. She said, when I jumped on this call, I had assumed that gentleman with the Southern accent and the beard was a huge Trump supporter. I just assumed it based off of nothing that he said, based off just the way he looked on his camera. And I really wanted to not listen to everything he had to say. And then she was like, but I realized, like, that's not helpful. That's not useful. I had just made this snap judgment. And it was cool of her to call herself out for that kind of thing, because we all do it. Everybody makes those kinds of
introspection and being able to reflect on your own bias when you don't know that you maybe even necessarily had a bias in that way, right? I think that's an incredibly that's a hugely important part of this whole process.
Yeah, because it allows people to look beyond the performance of a political identity and actually get to the root of the values of different political beliefs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know, like here in Utah was really not shut down for COVID for very long. We barely had mask mandates. Our, stay-at-home mandates were very, very short. And so when you see people today still wearing masks, the assumption often is, well, that person must be very liberal. That person must not be like the rest of the Utahns. But those kinds of judgments aren't very useful in the long run. Because it could be they, like me, that I have an autoimmune disease. They could be that they're feeling sick that day and they still have masks in their home because they want to protect others. It could be a million different reasons.
Yeah.
The jumping to judgment is just very destructive.
Yeah, that jumping to judgment does not produce good fruit. I mean, it just really doesn't. We often, just like the gal on that call was telling you, Stewart, she says, I thought this way about this person, and I didn't want to listen to anything that he said, but then she pushed through that and was able to obviously realize something more. And I think the most important lesson about that is the fact that she was able to look at herself critically and say, hey, what would I have missed had I stuck with my initial assessment of who this person is?
Yeah.
So these types of structures, Stewart, are so incredibly important. I mean, you start with, like you said, you start in these LRC sessions with what I would call the pro-humanity footing, right? Where do we want to be? Where do we want our family to be? What we want a warm bed to sleep in at night. We want food. We want security. We want freedom. These are all things that all human beings, everything's got exceptions, obviously, but I mean that's the pro-humanity stance, right? All of these things are things that almost all human beings want to have for them and their families. That pro-humanity stance. Once you start there, you build a foundation on which you can build almost anything. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And then going right into step 2 with the lived experience. How is your lived experience going to, or how has your lived experience rather affected the way that you feel about this particular situation? Hugely important. I mean, just those two alone will get you further in a conversation than almost anything that happened I would say almost anything that happens online. I wasn't sure exactly where I was going with that sentence, but the way that I see so much in this poisonous and toxic internet ecosystem that so many people spend so much time in, those are two things that we just don't see enough of in our general conversations. That pro-humanity footing, and that how has your lived experience led you to where you are for a position on this particular thing. Incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, just very good stuff.
I mean, I know just recently I commented on some Instagram news post about how I can't remember the exact story, but Trump is cutting budgets to PBS, and people are saying, well, Netflix is going to buy up the rights to Sesame Street to keep it going, kind of thing. And my comment was, oh, I hope that Netflix has a free tier then for families, the kinds of families that need access to PBS, to be able to access it for free instead of having to sign up for the, whatever the new price is per month. And some guy commented back to me. He said, you're okay with them killing Elmo because you're okay with them killing people in Gaza. And I was like, that extrapolation, like, I said nothing about anything. I didn't even say I was okay with them killing Elmo, I just said, oh, I hope Netflix has a free tier. It's just like completely out of left field. What you're saying is like very like not, it's what, no pro-human, no personal experience, no trying to understand, literally just jumping to as vitriolic as you possibly can be.
Yeah.
And so that kind of mentality is what we're fighting against with Braver Angels, with Living Room Conversations, with the whole bridging space.
Yes. And it really comes down to, like you said in the beginning of this conversation, Stewart, curiosity. I mean, curiosity, having a genuine curiosity for what your fellow human being has done, to get to where they are on a particular thing. We're not looking for at least I'm not. Again, I go back to it, I say it quite often. I'm not looking to change minds, I'm looking to open them. And the only way that I know works almost every time to open minds and build upon that curiosity muscle is to show people that I have a genuine curiosity for them and what they're about, who they are.
Yeah.
So, Stewart, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you coming on to DTH here to share a little bit about Living Room Conversations. Where can people learn more about LRC, Living Room Conversations, and then we'll kind of wrap this one up with some parting words from you.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, so Living Room Conversations, we are a national organization, so you can find local conversations basically in any city or state across the nation. We have livingroomconversations.org, which is our central hub. It's where you can find all of our resources, where you can find communities near you. You can also find us on basically every social media platform. Our Instagram and our LinkedIn and our Facebook are all Living Room Convo. And so you can find those across whatever one you choose to use. And we'd be happy to connect and to hear from anybody who wants to have conversations in their community.
Beautiful thing, man. Anybody promoting the idea of productive conversations and how we can have better conversations, curious conversations, certainly a friend of mine. Stewart Fletcher, Living Room Conversations. I do appreciate you, and take care of yourself, brother.
All right, thank you.
Friends, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to get the Derate The Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. We really are better together, so please take a moment to visit braverangels.org and consider joining the movement towards civic renewal and bridging our political divides. This is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make every day the day that you want it to be. With that, my friends, I'm going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.